Hey, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Shanae and today we're going to make my basic sourdough bread recipe. It's perfect for beginners. For this recipe, you will need very simple ingredients: bread flour, water, sourdough starter, and salt. This is completely optional, but I like to use my stand mixer for mixing my dough, and you can always use just a regular bowl, wooden spoon, your hands to mix the dough. I prefer to use my stand mixer with a dough hook attachment, and that's what I'm gonna demonstrate for you. In a mixing bowl, add water. I have a lukewarm water around 88-90 degrees, and to check, it's really important to check the temperature of your water so that it's not too hot, otherwise you can kill your sourdough starter. It's 83 degrees, which is perfectly fine. I'm using my Thermopan IR. Make sure your water is lukewarm. It just gives a nice boost to your dough right away when it's warm. And now into the water, I'm gonna add my sourdough starter, 100 grams of sourdough starter. In my previous video, I shared how I maintain and feed my starter. And if you haven't watched that video, please be sure to watch it. It's a very easy way to maintain starter without discards, no waste, and very convenient. So here's a perfect way to check your sourdough starter. If you drop a small amount into water, it should float. That means your starter is active and ready to go. I'm going to mix it into the water. It doesn't have to be completely smooth, but just break it apart. When the mixture looks like this, like there's no huge lumps of sourdough starter and flour, this is bread flour, and I recommend using really good quality bread flour because the quality of your flour, specifically protein content, directly affects the final product. Higher the protein amount of the flour, the taller they will rise. You will get nice, tall, fluffy bread. Into the mixture, I'm adding salt. We use 10 grams of salt, and I don't like to measure it by spoon because every salt is different. I use diamond crystal kosher salt, which is flakier, and it's exactly 3 teaspoons, but 3 teaspoons of regular table salt would be way too much for this, so I usually recommend to weigh your salt. Don't forget adding salt because the bread without salt is the grossest thing on earth. Don't ask me how I know it. I had to throw out 1 loaf of bread because I made that mistake, so don't do it. Now, we're going to mix my dough. Right now, you can use the spatula and mix it by hand with a spoon or spatula if you want to, but I'm going to put my dough hook attachment onto my mixer and mix it that way. We're gonna mix it for 2 minutes on the mixer, let it rest for 5 minutes, and then knead it again for 5 minutes. That way, flour will absorb the water evenly and relax the dough so that it's a little more cohesive. If you're kneading by hand, you don't have to knead it as vigorously, but just mix it until it's cohesive. So it's been 2 minutes of mixing, and the dough is really, really soft. I forgot to mention that I'm using 350 grams of lukewarm water to 500 grams of flour. That makes the hydration of the dough around 73%, and that considers moderate hydration. I'm gonna rest the dough for 5 minutes, and in the meantime, I wanted to tell you how the hydration affects the final bread. Higher the hydration, harder it is to handle the dough because it's super soft and sticky, but its higher hydration dough yields really nice bread, specifically with a nice crackly thin crust that is really crispy, then chewy, and then you'll get bigger, more open crumbs. Now, lower the hydration, say about 60-65% hydration, makes really nice dough that is really easy to handle. It's not too sticky. However, the crust is thicker and really chewy, like tough, and I don't like that. I prefer if you start with moderate hydration dough so that you love the bread you bake. 73% hydration, I feel like it's really great happy medium for me. It's not as hard to handle, manageable, especially if you're gonna use bench scrapers, and you will learn to handle that dough really, really easy. And you will get really nice bread. There are so many different ways of making bread. A lot of recipes call for autolays, and I've tried those methods and I find it very high maintenance, and I don't want my bread baking to be so consuming, and that's why I've come up with my simplified method, and which yields really good quality bread. And more specifically, I was looking for nice crispy crust that is not overly chewy, that is not too thick. I wanted open crumbs. Open crumbs means the holes. Nice soft interior and really nice and tall bread, not dense. And with this method, you will achieve that specific bread. As you can see, this bread dough is very, very shaggy, very soft. It really looks like, oh my goodness, I don't think it can form a bread. But here's what's happening. The gluten is very weak right now, and that's why the dough tears. And in this process, in this video, I'm going to show you how we strengthen the gluten in the dough, how we create a strong structure in the dough to create really nice bread. At the beginning, it's very normal for your dough to be so shaggy, really sticky and soft, but I'll walk you through the whole process and I'll show you how easy and elastic the dough becomes. Now it's been 5 minutes. I'm going to turn on the mixer, knead it for 5 minutes. Okay, the dough is looking a little smoother, but it's still really soft and a little on the shaggy side. This is when this flexible scraper comes in super handy. Some people find it soothing to work with dough with their hands, but I'm not one of those people. I really prefer not to touch sticky dough. Now, we're going to cover the dough with a plastic wrap or shower cap in my case. I love using shower cap because it's reusable and it's very convenient. I bought it on Amazon. In my previous video, I also shared this in my favorite tools. And let it rest for 30 minutes. Time works its magic. So my dough has been resting for 30 minutes. And we're going to work on building strength into our dough. What that means is, right now our dough is very shaggy and breaks easily. Scoop it out onto a work surface. You can have a bowl of water to wet your hands so that the dough doesn't stick. We're not going to use any dry flour when we are handling dough. Right now, dough, when you stretch it, it breaks. This shows that the dough doesn't have good strength. The gluten is really weak. There's not much gluten strands developed yet. And our goal is to build that strong gluten strands. And how do we do that? My favorite method is lamination method. Let's go ahead and spray a little bit water on the surface. And then we're gonna stretch the dough into a flat disc. Now, the first round is going to be really, really rough. It's gonna tear, it's not gonna be pretty. I will do the lamination process 3 times today, and I'll show you how the dough changes. The same dough, but time and this lamination works their magic, and the dough becomes super elastic. As you can see, it's really soft, tears really easy, sign of very weak dough. Totally normal. We're going to fold it now as best as we can. Like I said, it's a mess. In just a couple of hours, the dough will have such a good elasticity. When working with sticky dough like this, don't fight it. Let it stick to your hands and you just guide the dough. Don't push it, don't tear it. Just let the dough follow your hands. Fold it like so, and then now this corner's toward the middle. Now this is when hard bench scraper comes in super handy. Now we're gonna form a nice ball here. Turn it like that. Put it back in our bowl, cover it, and let it rest for 1 hour. Now, do we have to do lamination process 3 times and like every 1 hour. No, absolutely not. You can rest your dough 1 hour after mixing and then do one lamination process and let the dough rest for 3 to 4 hours to bulk ferment. It's not necessary to laminate every hour 3 times. It's just better you develop gluten strands, your dough will be really nice and strong. It will retain the air bubbles, the gas better. You'll have nice open crumbs. That's all it does. Depending on my daily schedule, sometimes I laminate once and call it good, sometimes 3 times. It's no big deal. When you laminate only once, your dough is a little bit denser and not as much air bubbles and tastes as good. So I'm going to come back here in an hour and we'll do another lamination process and I'll show you how much stronger our dough is going to be. So my dough has been resting for another hour. Look at that bubbles, some actions happening, though slightly enlarged, but not too much. But let's go ahead and do the lamination process again. I'm going to lightly spray the surface. When everything is lightly wet, the dough doesn't stick. Stretch it. See how different the dough is now? Stretches really nice and easy. Doesn't tear as easily. Another thing I noticed is at the beginning, as soon as we make the dough is dense, lifeless. It's really like, like just a lump. But as we let the dough rest and do its work, it becomes live. Like it just like, it feels different. When you try your hands at it, you will notice now like it has resistance a little bit. It just moves. I don't know. It's just so fun to notice. This is the stage I actually love using my hands and touch the dough because it's just so easy. It doesn't stick to my hands as much. Stretch as much as you can, as your counter space allows. Okay, now we'll go ahead and do a fold. We'll put your fingers under the dough and gently, no force, just let the dough follow your fingers. Now tuck in the corners. As you can see, not much flour stuck on the surface either, right? Now, you can use your hands and shape the dough a little bit, or you can use a hard bench scraper and do the same thing. By the way, this process called bulk fermentation, and this is when we build strong structure for our dough. If we don't do this step, our bread will be flat, really tough and chewy. It won't be like the same nice, fluffy sourdough bread that we are looking for. So bulk fermentation is very, very important. Now, if you're not planning to do the lamination 2 to 3 times, if you want to just do once, I recommend to do bulk fermentation for at least 5 hours. Usually 6 to 8 hour bulk fermentation is good as long as the room temperature is not too warm. If your room is really warm, like above 72 degrees, that will expedite your bulk fermentation stage and you don't want to over ferment your dough. Now I'll be right back in 1 hour and we'll do final lamination. So another hour had passed. Dough is looking great. As you can see, it's growing slightly still. At this point, the dough is super easy to work with. Now we just go ahead and do the same thing. We'll grab it and stretch it. See how different the dough is now? Now take the corners, lift it up, the top part, the sides. Now the corners, tuck it into the center. Beautiful dough. Doesn't even stick as much. Now we're almost ready for pre-shape. We're gonna let it rest here for about 10 minutes and then we'll shape it into our basket. So my dough has rested 10 minutes. It's easier to handle now. We'll go ahead and invert it. We're going to shape it into a tart. We need a little bit elongated shape. So stretch the top portion a little bit and fold it over. Stretch the bottom portion, fold it over. Now, just roll it like you would do burrito. Like so. Pinch the sides. Now, have a clean basket here. I'm going to generously dust it with brown rice flour. Brown rice flour doesn't dissolve into the dough and prevents the bread from sticking to the basket. So be generous. Now, take a bread scraper, scoop it out, and then seam side up. Cover it. Let it proof for about an hour, and then place it in the fridge overnight for cold proofing. Or you can proof it for 2 hours and bake it right away. I found in my experience that cold proofing is not necessary, but it develops the flavor longer, better. But as far as the rice, the open crumb and whatnot, it doesn't affect as much. So it's up to you. If you have time to bake it during the night, you can do that. Or you can just proof it for 1 hour at room temperature and stick it in the fridge overnight. It's very flexible. You can refrigerate it up to 12 hours. No problem, even 16 hours is fine. I actually prepared a dough yesterday and it's been cool proofing overnight in the fridge. So let's go ahead and bake this beautiful bread. I like to shake a little more rice flour on top, and I've been preheating my oven with a bread cloche in it for 1 hour, a little over an hour, to 425 degrees. Be very, very careful because it's all hot, and with the round bread like that, I like to place the bottom of the cloche on top of my bowl and flip it over, like so. Take it out. Now, what I like to do before baking is to spritz some water. This will create really nice blisters on top, and really quickly, we need to move really fast. And using your lamb, we're gonna make a slit at 45 degrees and about 1/2 inch deep. And I like to decorate my bread with decorative slices. Cover it and put it in the oven for 45 minutes, and then remove the lid and then bake it for about 15 more minutes until nice and brown, and then take it out. My bread is baked. Look at that gorgeous loaf. I'm going to transfer it onto a wire rack and cool it completely. Resist the urge to cut into warm bread. You want to cool it down completely so that you don't get mushy, gummy interior. So while it's cooling, I baked this bread last night, and let's cut into it together. It's completely cooled. As you can see, really nice and crisp crust. Sounds hollow. That means it's not very dense. And look at this beautiful ear. This is called ear. The ear is a good indication that it has a good oven spring. Let's cut into it. I'm so excited. One of my favorite things is to cut into a new bread. It's so addicting. You hear that crispy crust? This is what I was talking about blisters. It's because we sprayed a little water that creates that blisters. Okay, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Such an open crumb. This is what I like to see in my bread, so that they have nice open crumb, airy, and it's not as dense. Make a slice. Beautiful. And I like to toast my sourdough slices and then smear generous amount of butter before enjoying. I mean, a little bit uneven, huge hole here, but no big deal. Overall, it looks really nice. When it comes to sourdough bread, I don't like dense bread. And this is exactly how I like my bread. Homemade sourdough bread makes an incredible gift for neighbors, friends, and family. I like to package them in this cute paper bags. I got it on Amazon, and you can print out this Baked with Love custom tag from my website for free. And I challenge you to make this easy recipe and share the love of baking with those around you. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!